display that told a little story or a vignette. And that was the beginning of photo-roman. And then it kind of died down as a technique or a genre, if you will. And the Italians picked it up in the 20s, and the 30s, and the 40s, and really ran with it. And they actually had magazines that told stories with still images. And they often had a dialogue, you know, so you would have the photograph, and then like the bubble, so to speak, the little cloud with a narrative. And these magazines were everywhere. They were kind of like soap operas in a magazine. They were very famous. There was one called the Grand Hotel, and they literally sold millions of copies of these. So they were very famous in the 20s and 30s and 40s. Very popular. People just consume these things, and hopefully I'll get a chance to maybe show you a couple of examples. There happened to be a young model in Italy, just as a sidebar, a young model in Italy, and she started getting into the entertainment business by posing for these photo-romans. They were like soap operas in a magazine. And she was so successful, she was so popular in magazines, that a movie director contacted her to get into movies. It was Sophia Loren. She was the queen of the photo-roman magazines and novels in Italy. And the Italians also have another great word for it. They call it fumetti. Well, fumo means smoke, right? And what it was a reference. Fumetti was a reference to the balloons, the little white balloons above, you know, the figures of the thought balloons up there. So that was a word that they had for that. And when you think about it, photo-roman has continued to exist in a lot of different forms. Comic books, for example, right? It's an image, you have dialogue and thoughts. So it exists in that format still today. So when I found this book and this method, and Chris Marker was using this kind of thing, I thought, well, maybe this is a way for me to start using something like this to be able to tell stories with still images. Photo-roman is still taught today in film schools. If you're a freshman in film school at NYU or UCLA, one of your assignments is going to be to do that. Go out and take a 35mm camera, take pictures, make 5 or 6. And for kids and students, it's usually a day in the life kind of scenario. You know, so it's taught today. And obviously the logical extension of doing photo-roman is to begin putting these together and making films and cinema. One of the other inspirations I have for this, besides the street photography, is the French New Wave cinema. I don't know if you're familiar with French New Wave movies or not. French New Wave cinema really got going for only about 6 or 7 years, and it started in Paris. And what inspired me about those movies and those directors and those creators was the way that they filmed and photographed. There was so much a departure from what they had been doing for many years. The French movie industry after World War II really fell into a decline. They were stuck in that idea that you had to have the giant movie cameras. You had to have the giant movie cameras, the giant lights in a studio, and it was very old and very stuffy. So there was some young rebels, so to speak, and most of them were film critics, said, you know, we can do better than that. We don't have the budget, we don't have the money, but let's do something different. Well, what came along at the same time, and this is from like 1958 to 1964. That's the era of the New Wave. It was called the New Wave because there were so many movies came out, so many new directors. In that 6-year period, 120 new directors that had never made a movie, produced and directed movies for theatrical release. And they call it the French New Wave because it was like a tidal wave that came into the movie industry because there were so many people doing new things. Well, it was a technical innovation that really fostered that. And small little thing is someone developed a camera, and it's called the Eclair 16 millimeter. But rather than these giant movie film cameras, this Eclair 16 millimeter, you could put on your shoulder. Now all of a sudden, it was getting out of the studio. Now you could take, of course, we would look at these cameras now and think that they're pretty clunky. But back then, these group of young directors, they took their movie cameras and they went out into the streets and started filming on the streets. And once again, it's picking up that humanity, you know, the human factor of life on the streets in Paris. And their image, so I was inspired, and I'm always inspired. The French New Wave films is just one of my eras of film and cinema that I really like. It's just the aesthetics. They're mostly all black and white. There are some commonalities. Sometimes the plots are not really straight linear plots. They're narratives, but they're kind of ins and outs. They have plot twists. This group of photos that I put together has a narrative, and some people would call it a circular narrative because it ends where the first one begins. And that was very common in the French New Wave film. So that's, in a nutshell, the inspiration. It's really me wanting to try to find a way to express myself and to create narrative and storytelling. My family's all from the South. I come from a great line of storytellers. So I guess I inherited that. It's the inspiration from French, Paris street photography, as well as the New Wave cinema. So I've kind of incorporated all those things. It just kind of is a stew in my head that allowed me to create this. Now, what you're going to see, and I'll tell you a little bit about. I might as well just keep talking, because we've blown past the PowerPoint, and I'll show you the video. The images you see are not photographs, and I'll tell you what they are, and I'll tell you how I created them. These are digital images that I created. And I use the word artificial intelligence or AI, but I created the storyline. The story that you see and the story that you'll see in the video is my story. I sat and wrote out the story, and then I decided how many images I wanted to create and what it would take to create this story. So each one of these images here was designed in some way or some fashion by myself. Two of the images are inspired by photographs that I've taken in Paris. And one of the things you can do with these artificial intelligence engines is you can upload an image to it, and you can use that as a reference image, and you can create additional things with it. So two of them are from images that I made. One of them comes from a sketch. In fact, the sketch, the photograph with a couple and a young child on the beach right there, was a sketch that I made. I put that into the AI engine, and I said, create an image that looks like this. One of the things that you find when you do this is all of a sudden you're kind of like a junior movie director. Because in order to create these things, you have to be really specific. Number one, you have to be great with grammar. Because if you don't, people will be upside down and things like that. But I can't tell you how many six-figure people I've ended up with. And maybe that's a whole different show as the failures with AI. But you have to sit with each image and you have to basically design the image, either verbally or with other images. And so you have to play junior movie director. How do I want them dressed? What's the wardrobe need to look like? Where are they positioned? You know, do I want the camera to be above, a bird's eye view, a down low camera angle, a medium camera angle? You have to specify that in creating these things. So in essence, you're kind of doing what a photographer or a cinematographer in a studio would do, or a director. You're designing and creating these images. And you know, if you see the way they create movies, they have storyboards and they have production designers and things like that. That's what they do. They create images and then they go out and film it. Well, that's what I did to create these images. And once I created those images, I processed them just like I would a black and white photograph that I had taken. I used other photographic post-processing techniques like Photoshop, Lightroom, other things, because I wanted to get that look and feel of the French New Wave cinema movies. You know, the high contrast, black and white. I wanted it to be grainy. I wanted it to be moody. So I used those photographic tools to process those images I created. And that's how these are created. I used 3 different AI engines because each one of them has kind of different, unique characteristics. You can put the same words into one engine and get something totally different, but I used 3, which was in itself very frustrating. I used Adobe Firefly, I used ChatGPT, and I also used one called Midjourney. And sometimes, and there's a couple of images here that I'm not satisfied with, and I could not get AI to create those images.
What was wrong with it?
Well, what's wrong with it is I wanted a different image. I wanted
Okay, so it's entirely wrong.
No.
Okay.
I wanted him falling, but there's a tremendous amount of censorship in AI.
Okay.
There's certain things that it won't let you do. Because when you say, I want this person to be falling, I want him to be falling face first, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, that violates our community standards. Here's what I was telling you about. These are my photographs. This is kind of that transition that I was talking about of taking portrait photographers and trying to move on and develop some additional maturity in terms of how do you create images, still images that have narrative. I'm not even sure where I took this photograph or who it is, to be honest with you. I did find it. It goes back about 10 years. But it's not a bad portrait. It's the kind of picture that you would send to your Aunt Edna in Poughkeepsie and say, you know, we're doing fine back here in Cleveland. But there's really no story there. You know, it's nice. It's a nice image, and it makes you feel good. And I think it's the kind of image that's made for, you know, families and relatives and, you know, put in scrapbooks. This is some of the work that I've been kind of moving to in portrait photography, which is taking someone and putting them in an environment. And this is what Edward Hopper was so great at, was taking a person, putting them in the environment, and let the environment be part of the story as well. And obviously the person that you're working with has to have the right pose, the right facial expression, things of that nature. So that's kind of where I've been moving a lot with my photography. Oh yeah, here's the book that I found at the used book market. And this is what started the journey. It was just a bookmark that somebody had used with the name Chris Marker on it. And that's the DVD that really kind of inspired a lot of this. Talked about that. There's Sophia Loren in one of these magazines. Whoops. In one of these magazines. I don't know how big that image is, but there she is. You know, she was, like I said, she was the queen of the photo roman magazines. And they always came with kind of a pulpy cover. You know, they weren't photographic covers. They were these, designed and created, painted. And this is an example of one from the magazine. So once again, it was very, I'm not sure what it says, but it looks very soap opera-y. Here's some, let me just cover this. These are some of my favorite, and this is my photograph, by the way. These are some of my favorite street photographers. If you ever get a chance to take a look at them, Eugene Atjay probably the first and the premier street photographer in Paris. He never really appreciated himself as a photographer per se. One of the things he did was he took these images and he sold them to painters. And that's where he earned the most part of his living. And then as he got older, he began to appreciate a little bit of the work that he did. For the most part, his work went undiscovered until a young lady with Cleveland roots by the name of Bernice Abbott, who in her own right was a tremendous photographer, one of the world's great female photographers, met him in Paris. She went to Ohio State for a year. She dropped out, went to Paris, and started living her life and photographing in Paris. She met Eugene Atget at the end of his life, and that's her picture right there of him. And this was literally weeks before he passed away. She took his entire book of work that he had created, which really hadn't gotten much exposure, brought it back to New York, and basically unleashed it to the whole world. So we know about Eugene Atget because of Bernice Abbott. She didn't stay in Cleveland for very long. She was born and raised in Springfield, Ohio. But one of the really great women photographers from this area. One of my favorites, and you'll see this kind of look in the images that you have here, that I have, is a fellow by the name of Versailles. I'm not even sure what his real name was. He might have been by Versailles. I don't know if he kept it a secret, but I've not been able to find his real name. But he was kind of like the Night Stalker. He had a very, very dark aesthetic in his image. He did a lot of night photography, and that's him right there. Typical photographer, got his face glued to a camera and a tripod, smoking a cigarette. This is a couple of hundred French directors. There was only one woman director in French New Wave, Agnes Varda, and she made some brilliant movies. Okay, so my project, my exhibit is called Memory of Tomorrow, which obviously sounds kind of contradictory. How can you have a memory of the future? So what is this story? There's a romance. Two lovers who first met as children in a seaside. It's a bit of a mystery. There's a crime, and there's a tragedy that occurs in their life. There are a lot of supernatural elements, unexplained visions that I say intrudes on memory and time. One of the characters is beset by a vision, a childhood vision that he saw, and it sticks with him through his life, and that vision cascades. There's a lot of ambiguity. Some of you, when I show you the video, are probably going to ask, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I will tell you right now, it can mean several things. But that's one of the characteristics of French New Wave cinema plots. There's a lot of ambiguity to them. It doesn't tie up into a nice little bow or a package. There's possible several interpretations, and I intended for it to be that way. When I show you the video, one of the things I'd like for you to really take in mind, there's a thought process from Albert Einstein in the video. Take that to heart, because it really is the key to this whole show, and we'll show you that in just a minute. So that's what this project is. Photo roman. It tells a story. It tells a story about two young kids, two lovers in Paris, and what happens to them, and what fate has in store for them. You know how in the back of a book, sometimes they'll have a book club questions and things like that, thought provokers in the back of the books. I'm going to give you a couple of questions right now to keep in mind when I show you the video. So rather than waiting a minute, like I said, there's not one correct interpretation of the story. So when you see the pictures at the beginning, there's a pier, and this pier so there's a pier that it plays a central part in this whole story. So what does it mean? Does it have some meaning? Is it a place? Or why are the things and events occurring in this period? Is there some supernatural element there? There's a character in there called the Watchman. Who is he? Is he a presence for good or evil? There's a headstone in the story at a cemetery. Notice that the headstone is old and weathered. And then the female character in the story, her name is Elise. What's her connection to the Watchman? So, kind of cryptic, right? And if you can believe this, I did this all with 33 images. Okay. This is the video that may be helpful. And the pictures are in sequence as they go around the room. They are numbered with some little captions.